Huge prophetic events going on with the possibility of Israel splitting up and a two-state solution being met with Palestine. Absolutely incredible. If this happens, I mean, this is just all throughout Bible prophecy, and I'm going to get into that in this video. So this first article says the Prime Minister of Israel endorses Palestinian state at the United Nations. The Israeli Prime Minister Yair Lapid supported the creation of a Palestinian state in a speech addressing the United Nations General Assembly on Thursday, sparking a swift denunction from Israel's right. I'll play a clip of this here.
For the first time in more than a decade, an Israeli Prime Minister has recommitted to a two-state solution with the Palestinians. As CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl reports, his comments didn't sit well with many Israelis.
Prime Minister Yair Lapid told the UN General Assembly that Israel's economic and military strength enables it to strive for peace with the Arab world, including Palestinians.
An agreement with the Palestinians based on the two states for two people is the right thing for Israel's security, for Israel's economy, and for the future of our children.
This is such a prophetic event. I mean, if this actually happens, this is incredible. There's so much prophecy. We'll get into it here. But first, just to point out that Biden lauds courageous call for the two-state as U.S. groups push for peace talks. Biden tweeted out that he supports this, as well as Justin Trudeau comes out and posts on Twitter that he supports this. And before I mention the Bible verses surrounding this, I'll quickly mention that one of the hadiths that Muhammad himself said that the Muslim people actually believe pushes them towards their caliphate and their wanting to go to war, which is also in Bible prophecy. But Muhammad said himself in one of his hadiths, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the name of it, I'll put it on the screen, but he says, the hour will not be established until you fight with the Jews, and the stone behind which a Jew will be hiding will say, O Muslim, there's a Jew hiding behind me, so kill him. So Muhammad's false prophecies that the Muslims will try to fulfill will be against warring against Israel. We have the end times battle taking place in Israel and so much prophecy within this going on. So let's get into some of these about Israel being separated. Joel 3:2 says, I will gather all nations and bring them down to the valley of Jehoshaphat, and I will enter into judgment with them there on account of my people, my heritage Israel, whom they have scattered among the nations. They have also divided up my land. Zechariah 14:2 says, for I will gather all the nations to battle against Jerusalem. The city shall be taken, the houses rifled, and the women ravished. Half of the city shall go into captivity, but the remnant of the people shall not be cut off from the city. And now the one that is just so clear as day that we kind of all look for, it's one of those indications of Bible prophecy that when we know it takes place, then we can just guarantee that the final prophecies are coming to fulfillment. There's a few indicators of this throughout the Bible that when they take place, we know that the end time is fully upon us. One of the other instances that Jesus mentioned is when the gospel is preached to the entire world, then we can know that the end is near. But this end times covenant that will take place, mentioned in Daniel 9:27, says, then he shall confirm a covenant with many for 1 week, but in the middle of the week he shall bring an end to sacrifice and offering, and on the wing of abominations shall be one who makes desolate, even until the consummation which is determined is poured out on the desolate. This is in reference to the peace agreement that the Antichrist will bring within the region of the Middle East, and he will break that peace treaty, and then not long after that will declare himself to be God, as referenced in 2 Thessalonians 2:4, who opposes and exalts himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he sits as God in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. We can also look to these times and the destruction of Jerusalem and war going on in Israel, the splitting up of the land, all these things mentioned heavily by Jesus himself in Luke 21, which is a parallel passage to, well, it is about the Great Tribulation, also mentioned in Matthew 24, which is the most well-known Bible chapter about the Great Tribulation. But in Luke 21, Jesus gives more detail about Jerusalem, and he says in Luke 21, verse 20, but when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation is near. And then he goes on to say that let those in Judea flee to the mountains, and pretty much gives a warning that anyone shouldn't even go in their house and grab a bag. They just need to flee the region because destruction is soon coming. Also in verse 24 of Luke 21, it says, and they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led away captive into all the nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled by Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So much of Bible prophecy surrounds Israel, surrounds Jerusalem. I mean, we were talking about the end times and the Great Tribulation here, and a very specific declaration is given from Jesus that let those in Judea flee to the mountains. It doesn't say let those in the earth flee to the mountains. You know, us in America, we live thousands of miles away from Judea. So clearly something will be going on within the region of Israel. And as we know, when Jesus comes back, he brings the new Jerusalem, and he will be the temple, and he will be the light and everything. There won't even be a need for a sun when he comes down to Israel and brings the new Jerusalem. So tons of prophecy surrounding this. Now, just to mention briefly, of course, we who believe in Jesus Christ are the true Jew and the true Israel, but there is ties and covenants that I don't believe God has broken, and things, and maybe much of this destruction and this judgment that is brought upon Israel is because of the fact that they choose to not believe Jesus is the Messiah still. But God has made covenants with them that I just don't see that he's broken or that he's changed just because Jesus came. Some of these I just want to mention in Genesis in reference to Abraham and the land. And he says in Genesis 12, 1-3, and I'll paraphrase it, but he says, "Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you, and I will make you a great nation and will bless you and make your name great." Also in Genesis 12, and all of these I'm going to paraphrase a little bit, verse 7, he says to Abraham, "To your descendants I will give this land." And so he built an altar there to the Lord who appeared to him. And lastly, with a clear reference that just seems like there's something there with the land there, is Genesis 15:8, and says, "On that day the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land from the river of Egypt as far as the great river, the river Euphrates." So to me it seems like God made a covenant with Abraham, that God gave the land of Israel for it to be theirs and for them to fully live within the land and to serve God. Sadly, throughout much of their lifespan and even up to this day, the majority of them do not believe and follow in Jesus Christ and the truth of God. Just like Jesus said to many of the Pharisees, I don't remember the exact verse, but he mentions Abraham and Moses and saying, if they were even here, you wouldn't believe them. You say that you're so strict in following their ways, but they serve me. And they are, Moses and Abraham, they believe and accepted the Messiah. But these Pharisees and these people who are so strict on the law and they just refuse to believe Jesus is the Messiah, they're not living for him. So maybe that's why this is coming upon the region. But there's just too many verses about the land being divided up. And when these things happen, war comes and all these things, and there's going to be a peace agreement mentioned in Daniel. And that's what we know. The earth will be in turmoil when the Antichrist comes on the scene. The Antichrist will bring peace within the region, make these covenants, and they'll be broken, which will eventually lead to him standing in the temple and declaring that he is God and that he and his image are to be worshipped. So there's truly a lot in reference to this. And there's just so much going on with the red heifers in Israel that they could be sacrificed easily to cleanse the temple. Even some of the Jewish people in some of the videos say, well, we have the altar, we don't even need the exact temple to do this ritual. So there's that. There's also, this temple underground that they've built. We also have the news that they're building the train in Israel to go from the airport straight to the Temple Mount. I mean, things are moving clearly in this direction, and a lot of it has to do with Jerusalem. It really does. I mean, pretty much since the beginning of time, for some reason, that area and that land has been a focal point in God's eyes and guided just the course of history. So we should pray that the people there open their eyes to the truth that Jesus is the Messiah. Messiah had to come before the second temple was destroyed. So there's only one way. I mean, there's no Messiah coming anymore. When the true Messiah comes back, it's the second coming of Jesus Christ. But sadly, these people are expecting a Messiah to come, and who they're expecting will end up being the Antichrist. Like Jesus said, I came in my name and you didn't receive me. Another's going to come in his name. Him you will receive. There is just tons of Bible prophecy going on right now, and this can be massively huge if this is what takes place. Like I mentioned, there's a few key things in Bible prophecy that are absolute indicators of the timeline to know the season that we're in. Like Jesus said, watch, just like the fig tree, you'll know when its figs are ready that summer is near. And this peace agreement is one. The gospel spreading to every person on the earth is another. There's a handful more. The third temple is one in my eyes, and there's quite a few. But this dividing up of the land is definitely an indicator of these prophecies and these things taking place. So it's it's just important to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, to pray for those who are lost, those in Israel who don't believe Jesus is the Messiah, for their eyes to be opened, and for just the entire world to realize Jesus is the Messiah and the only way to heaven. Thanks for watching, and God bless.